Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Making Health 3.0 at the Edge a reality. I'm Heather Flannery with Equideum Health, our founder and chief executive officer. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to introduce my esteemed co-panelists today. And I'd like to begin with Dr. Joe Wood. If you would begin with your intro, please, sir.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Heather. First off, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this event today, and I'm honored to be here with my esteemed colleagues. Thank you, and welcome to all the attendees. I'm Joe Wood. I'm with Equideum Health. I am the Vice President for Decentralized Trials and Virtual Health, as well as the Vice President, or the Executive Director, of VICI, our Veterans-Facing Initiative. My background, I'm a physician, an endocrinologist by training, and a clinical researcher. I also spent many years in the research regulatory oversight world as well. Lastly, I spent a number of years developing telemedicine technologies and services for the U.S. Army, and most recently joining Equideum. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wood. And Frederic.
A warm welcome, everyone. I think my name is Frederic Sterberg. I'm the Senior Vice President of Cloud and Cognitive Services in Nokia. I've spent about 25 years in the telecommunication industry, but my initial background is actually, I think I'm an electronics engineer. I've also studied industrial automation, and on top of it, I'm, a social scientist. So very interesting combination. I think a very good fit for what we will be elaborating and discussing today.
Thank you very much, Frederic. And Amit.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Amit, leading portfolio and propositions for network function as a service business at Nokia. I'm in telecom industry from last 22 years, and my experience spans across operations, business development, and portfolio innovation. Incubated various portfolio around digital transformation, managed security, data exchange, analytics, and so on and so forth. I'm very passionate about ecosystems across industries and an avid believer in their role as a glue for realizing the potential for technology innovation happening around us in terms of 5G, edge data processing, cloud, and security. And their role, I believe, is even more vital for data economy growth by enhancing the data usage in digital transformation initiatives or driving data as a new revenue asset. And very excited to be part of this discussion today on how, together with Equideum Health and Nokia Bell Labs, we are making Health 3.0 vision a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. And Dr. Hoffman.
Thanks, Heather. Welcome, everybody, and it's a great pleasure. And thanks, Heather, for having us here today. My name is Marcus Hoffman. I'm leading the software and data systems research at Nokia Bell Labs. And even though I'm living at the beautiful Jersey Shore here in the US, as you probably figured based on my accent and dialect, I'm actually not from the US. I'm from Germany. I came about 24 years ago with the intent to stay for 1 year and then go back. But the Bell Labs bug bit me, and I'm still here. But my parents, of course, my family, they're still back in Germany. And with my parents aging now, with our oldest daughter being public health and our oldest son being a data scientist, all the stars are aligning. And I'm very passionate about the space that we are talking about here today. So I'm really, really super excited about the partnership, not just with our business partners in Nokia, but also with Equideum Health. And I hope we can actually achieve great things together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoffman. So do I, and that brings us to me. I am a serial entrepreneur that has been relentlessly focused on healthcare and life sciences, positive innovation since about 2005. So about 2/3 of my career. It has been my great pleasure to be closely involved in the community at the intersection of blockchain and Web3 and healthcare and life sciences, since there was such a community, which in blockchain years, which is kind of like dog years, if you've ever heard about dog years, that was about 2016, 2017. And I have been working on how to make interventions into what is a complex adaptive system that has so many moving pieces and parts and has a risk and rigidity and an absence of resilience, even though every independent stakeholder group in healthcare and life sciences are mission-driven, committed, individuals all around the world trying to address and deliver new medicines, close health inequities, cure diseases. Nevertheless, we have so much work to do. And something that is important to me is moving away from a culture of blame that looks at any one stakeholder group. Instead, what we're seeking to do at Equideum Health is discover and implement new ways to flow capital into old and well-known problems. And we believe that a new economy for health information, health data, and health relevant data is at the heart of making this possible. So a core part of our strategy as a company is to launch the Equideum Exchange, which will financialize health and health relevant data as an asset class. But importantly, extremely importantly, the data subject, the person, the individual about whom this data describes and represents, we believe that person deserves to have economic inclusion in those financial flows. And importantly, very importantly, they deserve privacy, agency, dignity, and empowerment in the context of how the information about them is used, and that their goals and aims and ambitions and well-being and prosperity are the priority in how that information is used. The Equideum Exchange is going to has a lot of work to do in terms of creating new transactional structures by which data buyers can source and access health and health relevant information. And we believe health and health relevant information that is superior in a number of ways to the data that can be procured today. That means higher quality data, higher integrity data, data with fully explainable provenance, verifiable identities of not only the data subjects, but the institutions and providers and investigators who may have been involved in sourcing that data, verifiable identities even of devices at the edge that may be important parts of those data sets, which we'll cover in this event as well. So these are exciting times. It's very dynamic, but I think it's going to be an incredible conversation today. And I'd like to, but before I get going, I just would like to pose to the audience the question, because I'm wondering how many of the audiences might already guess at how we would begin. With a set of challenges so sweeping and significant, how would you decide what kind of data procurement transaction should be the first transaction available and why? And then if it is human data that we're talking about, who have particular needs that need to be met in this economy, which populations might we prioritize to be the first to be empowered in this new economic flow? So with that, I'd like to turn my first question over to Dr. Wood, but any quick reactions before you address that from the panel is also welcome. Dr. Wood.
Thank you, Heather. I'll level set a little bit and talk about clinical trials in general, because it's the focus area and it's what we're offering to consumers as our initial offering. Randomized clinical trials, as many of you probably know, and some perhaps not, it's the gold standard for bringing new drugs, devices, treatments, and knowledge to patients. Clinical trials are done under very strict methods and a regulatory framework for validating safety and efficacy. An interesting tidbit, the first documented clinical trial in history was about 500 BC, and it was a study looking at dietary interventions, believe it or not. It was comparing vegetables and water to wine and meat. Lasted about 10 days, and needless to say that the veggie and water diet, those patients were deemed to be more healthy. It's fascinating to me as an endocrinologist that we're still doing clinical trials on diet. And the topic is one of much debate in the healthcare and in the lay community as well. A little bit more about clinical trials. On average, it takes somewhere between 10 and 12 years to bring a new drug treatment to market. And that's approximately $2.5 billion. There are many, many reasons for those delays. In particular, 86% of trials don't meet their enrollment timeline. So that really slows down the process. And as a result, patient recruitment represents one of the largest drivers of costs of clinical trials. So how about veterans? Why are we focused on veterans? I'm a veteran myself. I've spent 30 years in the United States Army, and veterans are an underserved community. Although there is a robust Veterans Administrative health system for veterans, only about 25% of veterans get their health care within the VA health system. They have unique challenges and unique problems distinct from other populations. For example, the suicide rate in veterans is among the highest in our population. Other unique problems such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and a whole number of other problems that are unique to veterans. And empowering veterans to be part of the research enterprise and empowering them with data and to be part of finding new treatments and new solutions to their unique problems is a great focus, we believe, and one that we're passionate about. There are many challenges to recruiting patients. Some of those have to do with the centralization of both medical data and limitations of medical data that we currently have access to. The average person in the U.S. Sees approximately 20 to 30 different providers throughout a lifetime across 20 or more healthcare systems. So you can imagine trying to match a clinical trial to a patient with that data scattered all over the place. It's very, very difficult. I'll stop there and look forward to comments from the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. I wondered if you might quickly elaborate for the audience who may not be from the clinical trials space. What is the move to decentralized clinical trials, and how does that address, how would decentralizing clinical trials impact the diversity and inclusion of human research subjects, especially from vulnerable populations, such as some in the veterans community? And then also, what's an adaptive trial, and how could that also be influenced by our work?
Certainly. Traditional clinical trials are very centralized around academic medical centers in various cities around the country and around the world. Decentralized clinical trials, in contrast, go to where the patients are. So by virtue of the centralization of traditional clinical trials, you have limited access to patients by geography and by diversity, certainly in rural areas. Also, within metropolitan areas, you have patients that don't have access to healthcare, and they may not be engaging with those healthcare systems, and their data aren't in those data sets and those EHRs. And utilizing decentralized methods, which is simply using telemedicine technologies and other mobile health technologies to reach those patients wherever they may be, can drastically increase access to patients, but also more diverse patient populations. And in terms of adaptive trials, clinical trial protocols are typically very, very strict and structured. And if you want to change anything, there's a long regulatory process to go through. And data is analyzed at specific times throughout the course of the clinical trial and making adjustments slowly over time. Adaptive trials, if you're able to look at the data at real time as it's coming in and make adjustments as the trial is ongoing, we should be able to shorten those trials. And studies have shown that by doing adaptive trial design, you can drastically shorten clinical trials. Likewise, as I mentioned earlier, the enrollment challenges that we have with clinical trials, using decentralized trial methodologies, we can definitely, it's been shown repeatedly, you can shorten the timeline of enrollment, you can decrease enrollment timelines, and getting that 10 to 12 years down to something much more reasonable. Because every month, every day that a life-saving therapeutic is delayed to be able to treat a patient, that translates into increased morbidity and mortality, frankly.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Any commentary from the panel?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think to see the difference. I believe between centralized and decentralized. I think handling and collection of data, and that reminds me actually. I think of our core competence in the telecom industry, where we for a long time always were talking about connected the unconnected, and I think that's very much falling in line of the same idea. Just I think taking it to a very different level.
Yeah, and imagine the data set. If me, you, if us as individuals, if we had our own data estate that included all of our healthcare and health relevant data, to include all the Internet of Things, imagine what sort of rich data set there would be in that scenario versus what we see now, which is fragmented data across multiple medical systems, and typically no social determinants of health, which are a major impact on health outcomes. Most data sets that we have access to in doing clinical trials don't have that data.
So if I may pick up on this, and again, I'm a techie, right, and I have no expertise in the health space, so please take that with the appropriate grain of salt here. But you mentioned also the cost, right, of actually doing trials like these and getting the hands of data, and to me, this also is a big roadblock to really true innovation. Meaning, if we can lower the threshold for newcomers to come in and do fantastic innovation with the huge data that we have available, while of course taking account privacy and rights of users, right? So I would hope that by doing this, we can also really stimulate and accelerate and fuel innovations in that space too, that traditionally had a very, very high entry threshold. Do you see it similarly like this, or just curious, because the health space is a little bit different than the areas we are typically working in?
Yeah, absolutely. The privacy is a huge issue, and that it's one of the blockers for patients getting into clinical trials. They're concerned about what happens to their data, where does it go, who has access to it. And currently, in today's environment, you sign the consent form to participate in a trial, and you really have no visibility on where the data is going and how it's managed. So certainly, and I can't wait to hear more about all the privacy preserving techs, because I'm a non-techie guy. I'm the operational guy doing things on the ground. So that's what's so exciting about today is we have technologies that can ensure privacy in ways that were never available before.
Absolutely. And so while we're beginning on the supply side of the data in the US, on the demand side, the demand is global from day one. And our global partnership with Nokia in this context is very, very exciting for the creation of this new economy. And ultimately, the Equideum Exchange will deliver both global supply and global demand coming together. I'd love to hear, Frederic, if you could, give us the perspective that led Nokia to create the Nokia Data Marketplace product. What did you see, and how did you contemplate what was happening in our world and why this was a timely and strategic decision?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think a very interesting and essential question, because when we look at Nokia historically, we always knew how to connect our devices, right? For the last 25, 30 years. Later, I think to connect things. And ultimately, I think we collected a lot of data, right? Directly or indirectly. But I think what we realized is that the secure sharing of data, making data available and monetizing data, I think was a challenge we had no initial answer to. And I think on top of it, and this was, I think, maybe one of the catalytic events, I think, when we have seen, I think, the pandemic, we have engaged, I think, by the way, I think, with many institutes, I think, with organizations, they said, oh, can we use, I think, mobile data, I think, to track people and everything, right? And there was no universal answer to this, because I think there were 4 challenges we saw, right? So number one, I think there were a lot of data silos. Right, any exchange of, I think, data would have been manual, super slow, and I think, there was no real, I think, security concept that fitted a proper, I think, secure data exchange. Second, I think compliance. Country-specific regulations, I think, were so huge that I think we had almost to give up, because you cannot simply move data from country to country within, I think, the existing legislative framework, right? Number three, and I think that's another one, real time. Data exchange, I think, in most of the situations, non-real time. But for what I think, we wanted to use, it should be real time and almost real time. And I think, this is where I think even the edge comes into play. Because if we would like, I think, to use data in real time in huge, I think, volumes, I think it has to be at the edge. And I think number four, I think data ownership. I think, as already, I think, mentioned before, data ownership, transparency on what happens to the data is something I think that was clearly in the top of our mind when we looked at creating now the Nokia Data Marketplace. With the Nokia Data Marketplace now, we provide a platform where I think ecosystem participants that is not limited to health, but of course I think we're enjoying the partnership with Equideum Health, can securely exchange data with other participants by uploading data streams. Right? NDM is for secure data sharing, monetizing, and AI orchestration. Right? It uses a private blockchain technology. So I think data are safe and can be traced, and this provide full transparency. And I think for this, we are in line with most country-specific data regulations and legal limitations of, I think, the various, I think, requirements. This means also, I think, that the data stay where they are, and we apply distributed learning using AI algorithms. And I assume, I think, Amit Kumar might talk a little bit more about this. So I believe with the combination of, I think, Equideum knowledge in the space, together with our blockchain technology, federated AI, ML learning, we will drive the transformation for the health industry. And as Nokia, I think we're really, really seeing ourselves beyond, I think, the industry where we are anchored as a transformation agent for, I think, the industry and for the ecosystem overall.
Thank you, Frederic. It's at Equideum Health, when we began to examine and look at the Nokia Data Marketplace and explore our partnership, we just became increasingly excited at the potential of our collaboration very quickly. Now, what we're building in terms of the market architecture for the Equideum Exchange includes Nokia Data Marketplace as a foundational piece, and we are together with our partners, Microsoft, Intel, and Consensus, spelled with a Y. We are opening up the Equideum Exchange to the Ethereum ecosystem of decentralized finance. And it's such an exciting implication of bringing this truly Web3 notion, your point of data ownership, Frederic, making it possible with the combined apparatus not only of the Equideum Exchange, but how we will empower consumers directly, coming together in a truly open, fully financialized marketplace that still preserves the privacy, dignity, agency of the data subject and creates the economic inclusion for the data subject. One quick detail I would like to add, just so that there can be no confusion: there will be no transactions through the Equideum Exchange of data with a human subject where the data subject did not provide a fine-grained verifiable consent under a verified identity. So this is not going to be another data exchange that brokers what is considered de-identified data today. It is a fundamentally new approach, which we're so excited to be pursuing in parallel. A key part of that new approach, Frederic, you touched on, it's not about data for data's sake. The big deal about self-sovereign data and high-quality data is really about the implications for AI in our future. These combinations of technologies that our companies together are focused on are the the core technological breakthroughs that can unlock the use of AI in healthcare and life sciences to enormous impact on humanity, while providing the guardrails that we need for trusted and verifiable AI, for secure AI, for unbiased AI. And with that, I would love, Amit, if you'd be so kind as to unpack the really extremely innovative ideas at the of involving AI and ML that are at the core of the Nokia Data Marketplace offering.
Sure. So just picking up from what Frederic mentioned, right? So there are three fundamental capabilities we have built in the product. One is which allows data buyer, data provider, or to come in a ecosystem approach together and share and exchange data by using blockchain. Second component is when we talk about the blockchain, we are using private permission blockchain that provides necessary control, immutability, trust for the transaction. And as Heather already touched upon, is that we have an abstraction layer that allows us to interface with public blockchain environments. So effectively, the transactions will be taking place using both fiat currency or public crypto in future. Now, the third component is the microservice-based architecture that allows the invoking the respective functionality through APIs from the platform. And we have a range of smart contracts in the platform, which allows a lot of automation in terms of capability to do the real-time revenue share, because idea is to allow multiple ecosystem participants to collaborate in a very seamless manner while not worrying about the security of how the transactions are taking place. And that's where these smart contracts will come very handy in terms of revenue share, delegation, notarization, and so on. The most important component, which Heather has asked as a question from me, is about the AI/ML orchestration. Now, while we are talking about data, I think most important aspect is about the insights we can extract from the data, because that is the business usage, or the purpose of this ecosystem, that businesses will access the data and as well as the intelligent insights to their data. Now, what we have is a federated learning or AI/ML orchestration feature that can be applied on distributed data set without the data movement. So this is a very important point, that we don't move data, and data resides behind what we call distributed proxy, which is a functional component of data marketplace, which completely masks the location of the data. So your enriched data set or data itself is sitting behind proxy, and AI/ML can be executed on these multiple data sets simultaneously without moving the data. And the presentation can be made through the APIs. Let me further elaborate a little bit on that. Why it is important is that for any complex algorithm to give a meaningful result, we need reliable and large data set. The data, generally what we have seen in telecom or any other industry, is usually distributed, sometimes very confidential, sometimes faces multiple regulatory constraints, and that limits the opportunities to train the models and ability to extract meaningful insights. And especially, if you look at emergence of edge data and real-time analysis requirements, that will further enhance this challenge. Now, when we talk about AI/ML orchestration feature, we can run these multiple algorithms simultaneously across these data sets and train model faster. We expect the entire process efficiency of around 70 to 80% when we are training new and complex algorithms and running it across multiple data sets. This opens up multiple opportunities and possibilities which were earlier difficult, especially in industries which were dealing with sensitive data, whether it is government sector, airlines, healthcare, telecom. And let me throw one example. For example, airline data. And we have been working with one of the aviation consortium, which was working with multiple airliners to improve the aircraft engine preventive maintenance process. Now, the problem is that one single airliner does not have sufficient data, which means if you want to train your model, you have to run that model across multiple data sets, which is residing across different airliners. And obviously they cannot, or they don't want to move the data because of either size or complexity associated with the regulatory and confidentiality aspect. But with Nokia Data Marketplace, we have been able to execute those AML models on the data sets which were stored for a similar model of type of aircraft across different locations. And that this is where federated machine learning feature of Data Marketplace, I believe, will play a very important role from a health segment perspective. Especially if we talk about Equideum Exchange, NDM will be able to enable the orchestration of encrypted models execution on diverse health data sets, which will be residing in health data lockers, as Heather mentioned in the beginning, through obviously intelligence and learning networks. What we expect is it will also encourage external AI innovation to collaborate on Equideum Exchange and drive innovation on health data. So what we believe is, when we look at the data marketplace and the thought process, what we have put together is that we want to enable ecosystem, collaboration, seamless experience of multiple entities coming together, automation in terms of how they are going into agreements, how the transaction settlements are taking place, plus also support in terms of the innovation, which has to go into getting the right extract or insights from the data, which is stored behind, in diverse data sets.
Thank you so much, Amit. Something that is not necessarily obvious or intuitive to our audience is this idea that the individual data subject, the consumer, can aggregate, curate much more data about themselves than any single enterprise ever could. So if we think about the data subject as the only appropriate party to aggregate data about themselves from N sources, they also are in the position to curate that data. And an important part of the Equideum Health side of this story is that data coming inbound into the personal data estates of consumers has to be cryptographically locked, or the data cannot retain clinical utility if transferred to a provider organization, for example. It also needs to be semantically normalized. It may need to go through any number of pre-processing elements, and there is annotation and enrichment to the data that needs to be performed to make all of this work. All of that is on inbound or on ingest into a consumer-centered infrastructure that retains the clinical utility and provenance of that data as it's coming inbound. The other point, if I could, I wanted to build on what you were saying. The implication of a data economy where data analytics, as we know it as an industry, and data brokering, as we know it as an industry, or the straight purchasing of source data or raw data files, actually are going to come together in the Equideum Exchange, because data buyers sometimes want raw source data, but often, to your point, what they actually want are compute results, analytical findings that they could actually trust, that are cryptographically verifiable and that are performed on a compute infrastructure and on data with very high integrity and verifiable provenance. That's true for data buyers from for example, the pharmaceutical industry or the med device industry or any sponsor of clinical research and public health research as well. It's also true for data scientists everywhere who are seeking to source data pipeline. We all hear continuously about how hungry AI is for big data. It's not just big data. It's the right data at the right time that it is needed and with the level of quality and integrity that can result in a trusted and explainable AI. So through the Equideum Exchange, data scientists everywhere will be able to, for the first time, rigorously specify precisely what is needed, not only technically and semantically with respect to the description of the data, but legally and ethically. These are the sourcing priorities that need to be involved with this data or compute result that I am purchasing. And for the first time, a consumer who has a personal data estate can make it available for analytical use without exposing it to anyone at all, without copying it somewhere else, without sending it anywhere. That is a truly revolutionary capability that has such inspiring potential for the future of trusted AI in our industry and in other industries. Do you agree, Ahmed?
Absolutely, and especially if we allow, first of all, the community of interest in terms of researchers or AI/ML innovator companies, and we provide the structured data access, I would say, because data is not moving in this case, to collaborate on in an ecosystem approach. That will have a phenomenal result for industry as a whole, or a specific industry which is moving forward with thought process in this direction.
Thank you. Well, so one thing that's been alluded to a couple of times in this discussion, but we haven't really leaned into it yet, is that health and health relevant information is increasing literally exponentially with no end in sight. And that means that the idea of attempting to centralize all of that information into EHR systems, for example, is simply an untenable idea in our opinions. So this implication of what to do about edge data and how to create value is a really big strategic part of the future of this data economy that we're seeking to create together. And that's where our collaboration with Nokia Bell Labs comes in, which I'm so proud and excited about. And I'm wondering, Dr. Hoffman, could you please explain to our audience the implications for edge device identity, edge data security, and our shared research, applied research work in that field?
Yes, Heather, thanks. Absolutely. And I want to pick up on what you said and also what Amit and Frederic also already said. It's really less about the raw data. Yes, we need these huge amounts of raw data. We need to collect them, but it really is about the insights, the value that we extract from this raw data, right? And we cannot handle also these huge amounts of data that will be generated by these billions of devices that we have. But as Amit already indicated, luckily we have analytics and machine learning that can very early on in the process extract the relevant insight and actually aggregate the information, focus on the information that's really relevant. And that's exactly where edge data processing comes in, edge analytics comes in. So we started actually with a very naive kind of approach where we take data from all the data sources, transfer the data into some big data centers, and then run these data analytics machine learning models on these big iron, really powerful machines and servers. This is good when we start out, when we don't have so much data. But now imagine what happens if everybody from us has not just smartphones and sensors in the home, but we have wearables. We have maybe in-body devices, sensors. We are surrounded by a multitude of sensors that all generate data that is tremendously helpful. And some of these data streams are very high bandwidth. Just think about a 4K video camera that might analyze how a person moves, for example, if an elderly person has fallen or not. We cannot afford, in no way can we afford, transmitting that data always to a big data center and then analyze it there. So the answer is moving, as Amit already indicated, moving the analytics to the edge. But then the question is also, what is the edge? Of course, is our regional data centers closer to the user? But what about if we don't stop here? What about if we enable compute even in enterprises or in homes? We all have these access points, Wi-Fi access points and little home hubs. Why can't we run analytics on there? But in Bell Labs, together with our Nokia colleagues, we go further. Why stop there? Why can't we put analytics in little devices? I have a little earbud here. I'm not sure if you see it, a little earbud that I can put in my ear. Why can I not run analytics on this earbud and therefore avoid having to transmit sensitive data like audio to any server in the network? Well, this was not possible before because you need a lot of power, a lot of storage, a lot of compute. But thanks to the work from my teams, we are for the first time now ever able to run very complex machine learning models on devices like these. And now imagine what that enables. Now we can, like Amit said, we can now bring the machine learning models to where the data is generated, either at the network edge, in your home, or even on your body or in your body even, run the analytics there and get the valuable insights then in a much smaller scale but higher value out to actually where the data scientists need this, right? This has huge advantages. Being a communications company, of course, we reduce the bandwidth needed, right? Just imagine, I no longer need to transmit a 4K video to my server. I do the analytics here and just send a little alert, person has fallen, yes or no, 1 bit per 24 hours to the cloud. I tremendously reduce the bandwidth. But think about also the privacy. Talked a lot about privacy. This data, how do all these smart audio assistants work these days? They record us. They record us in our most private environment and transmit audio to some servers where we run the analytics. I don't want that. That's why I unplugged all these smart speakers in my home. What I want is the analytics run on this little device. The audio never leaves that device, never. We just send out analytics about that are relevant for the medical studies, for example, for taking care of the people, right? So this is something that where the edge really plays a big role. But then if we think about that just one step further, as Amit already indicated, we bring the algorithms, the learning, and even the training of the models to where the data sits to ensure the privacy. But this is really important. But what about the privacy of the model owners? What about a medical company that had spent millions and billions in developing a proprietary, very advanced machine learning model and now wants to train it? If you are that company, would you trust, hey, I'll take your model and just put it somewhere where the data sits and execute on it? I wouldn't. So therefore, what we do together with Nokia Data Marketplace, with Equideum Health, is looking at this problem. How can we also protect the privacy and the interest of the model owners? Because if we manage to bring those two pieces together, imagine what happens. We have individual users, because they have the privacy, they see the benefit, they make that data available for others. We have a flood of innovation coming in because we lowered the threshold for people to get access, and you no longer have to worry about that you reveal your proprietary insights, right? And now we have a marketplace that just fuels, Lightning Explosion fuels innovation that was never possible before, right? And this is why I'm so excited about working with Amit Fredric's team, with Equideum Health. And I think this is something that hopefully will also help me with the problem I mentioned at the beginning, taking care of my aging parents in Germany, right? So that's why I'm super excited about that.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. So inspiring and just spot on. You know, it brings to mind connecting a dot in the minds of our audience between all that you just described about what in healthcare is sometimes called remote telemetry or devices along those lines, and this notion of decentralized trials where the site of the clinical research is the home in large part. And Dr. Wood actually has an extensive experience in that kind of clinical research using those kinds of edge devices. I'm just curious, Dr. Wood, do you have any perspectives from the investigator point of view on what everything that Dr. Hoffman just described can mean for decentralized clinical trials?
Sure, absolutely. I'll do a compare and contrast. So right now, what we do with, say, remote home monitoring using any number of devices, I'll just use, for example, glucometers, blood pressure cuffs, scales for weight, fitness trackers. You know, the individual has to tie all that those devices into a single place and push it up to a cloud. And then on the clinical side, on our research studies, we had to pull that down, and then taking all that raw data to turn it into something actionable, which required a fair amount of human capital to do that. And all of that could really be done in the way that you described, much more efficiently, much faster, much more accurate. in ways. So it's very exciting. As you were talking, I was also thinking about, there's so many medical devices besides the ones I mentioned, pacemakers, implantable defibrillators. Within hospital systems, the infusion pumps are all wired to the network. There's so much fascinating and exciting things we can do using this technology by being able to do the compute on the edge, compared to what we historically have had to do is to pull it down, analyze it, collate it before you can get actionable information. So very exciting stuff. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and if I also pick up on a little bit this, because if this is done the right way, I think we can really also encourage and motivate and stimulate every one of us to contribute and participate with providing data, right? So for example, if somebody would come to me today and say, Marcus, I know you have all these variables and the earbuds and everything that generate a lot of a big amount of valuable data. Would you be willing to make that available so that some clinical students or companies could run tests that might help with the next big health breakthrough? Today, I would be reluctant because I have no idea, to Heather, what you said, where this data goes, one point. And second, today, my data is being used, not necessarily pointing to the health company, more to other social media companies. My data is being used to make big companies rich. And I have a little bit an issue with that. But if there is a way for me to participate by being in control of the data, by being able to benefit a little bit from this data, and imagine everybody would do that, the amount of data we can get in and that can be made available in a controlled way, this will completely change how research innovations in the health space and in other areas are being done. So this is spot on what you said. I think this is a big hump that I think we need to take.
Yeah, and if I may, I think add something in the line of what Marcus was saying. I think there's a huge social economic impact. If we can inspire the trust, right? I do believe, I think this is one of the key elements that will decide between success or I think a delayed success. I would not call for failure, but I think it's a matter of, trust. I think if we can inspire trust in the first place, I think there will be a big up. And I think look, I go back a little bit when I think our major industry, telecommunication, mobile communication, started. Right, it was at the beginning. I think something. I think people had very low expectations, and then it exploded, and we knew where it led us. And I think data economy, when we set it up in the right way, will most probably see the same explosion. Right, and this is why I'm so super excited. I think with being part of this, because I believe and particularly in the health sector, I think this is something that has been waiting really. I think for this evolution, or better to say revolution. And I think very very clearly this is a first step.
There's such inspiring possibilities for us to create extraordinary value in this way. Something we also have to remember is that these edge devices that we're discussing in these edge data field streams are well known to be, unfortunately, profound cybersecurity vulnerabilities in the current state. We don't know which devices can be compromised, have been compromised. We don't know what data feeds could be amended. So injecting the notion of a trusted device, meaning an edge device in our context means it has gone through a registration process. It has been verified at multiple levels. Importantly, it has been identified, and that identity has been connected to verifiable identities of providers who prescribed or are using that device, institutions who are selling that device, for example, in durable medical equipment, for instance, and the human beings who are the data subject. All of this is vital to the fine-grained consent apparatus that is integral to the ability to fulfill the vision that we're all describing here. In the same technologies that improve the integrity of the data for scientific and clinical purposes also create the mechanics for economic participation of the data subject and also are very, very important pieces of the cyber defense, including the cyber defense in the trusted AIs that we want to train versus perhaps not as trusted AIs that could have been influenced in any number of ways in their training process. So with that, I think we are. It's amazing how fast this has gone. We have just a little bit of time left. Audience, I'm hoping that we have time to take at least a couple of your questions, and we're going to do that in a moment. So please do take this time to capture some of your questions. We have a quick announcement about what's coming next to make, and then we'll take a few questions, and then esteemed co-panelists, I'll be inviting you to make a closing remark. So I'm delighted to share with this audience that we have decided between our organizations that we are going to make today's event the initiating point in a series of events leading up to the launch of the Equideum Exchange. We have identified a number of themes where an hour will barely be enough to scratch the surface of these individual themes that we've really only had the opportunity to just mention in today's events. These are not necessarily the order in which the events will be produced, but the themes that we're going to cover over these next 6 months or so include the health equity and ethics consideration of every aspect of this data economy that we're contemplating. This particularly focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in clinical research subjects. And that is the next theme of the deep dive on how will privacy-preserving clinical trial matching be facilitated through the Equideum Exchange, and really unpacking what that will mean and what that looks like and how it's substantially different from any of the trial matching capabilities now available. The third theme we're going to go into is looking at machine learning at the edge and everything about sourcing data pipeline if you are a data scientist, and what that can mean to the creation of explainable, trusted, and ethical AI. Next, we're going to deep dive on identity and talk about exactly how we're intending to bridge the divide between what are now no verifiable identities to speak of, but we need verifiable identities that bridge and relate across human relationships, devices that are generating data about them, and organizations and institutions that are involved in delivering or administering or paying for healthcare services. Then there's so much to discuss at the intersections of cybersecurity and compliance, starting in U.S. jurisdiction, but looking globally. There's much to discuss in that area. And then finally, we will be looking at decentralized finance and the crypto economics and market architecture for this new data economy. And there's all of these are major topics, and I'm so honored and pleased that we will have the opportunity together to unpack and describe and explain our thinking in all of these areas. So with that, any quick reactions on the themes while I'm taking a glance at the questions?
I would say, I think, Heather, it's really, I think, very, very good to see how we are diving into the different aspects of what we are, I think, indicating today. And I would say it must not be the end, right? It's just the beginning. I believe, I think, as we go, and hopefully with a lot of feedback from the audience, we can take it even one level further. And I think work with the audience and amongst ourselves, I think explaining and elaborating more on areas and fields.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
And just picking up a little bit on this also, we actually do absolutely believe, I'm convinced that if we get this right, and we will get this right, this will be a blueprint, not just, I think, for the health industry. This is something that we will also take to other industries, other verticals. But why is starting with the health industry so exciting? Because the health industry has two characteristics that make it very interesting. A, just a flood of data that we can extract, just huge amounts of data, but also an industry with probably the strictest privacy and security and integrity demands. If we get that right in that industry, we can apply that to other industries as well. And I think this is something why it's really really interesting and exciting to start in that partnership, because we can then take our findings and also help other verticals, in my opinion.
Totally agree, Dr. Hoffman. Absolutely. And when we at Equideum Health talk about health relevant data, I think we have a common understanding of what we mean by health data classically, like data in electronic health records, data in claims systems, data about your medications at your pharmacy, and so forth. What we mean by health relevant data is data that can influence social determinants and describe social determinants, which we know is the most indicative of population health endpoints and clinical endpoints. We also mean genomic data and other extremely sensitive data classes where the privacy considerations are as extreme as they get. And how do we transform toward precision medicine by unlocking the cybersecurity, bioethics, and compliance challenges connected to self-sovereign biometric data, including genomic data, multi-omic data, et cetera. Very, very exciting. I think we have time for one question before I invite closing remarks, and the question has to do with how will we create clarity about the patient or the person as a true stakeholder. You could imagine how someone listening to this event sees a very commercial, very corporate kind of point of view. How will we clarify that the person, the individual data subject, is in fact truly an economic stakeholder in this vision? And I'm curious, as a physician, do you have a point of view, having worked with many vulnerable populations in your career, Dr. Wood, on what might be some of the most important things that we need to achieve to fully enfranchise individual data subjects into this new economy?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is trust, has been mentioned multiple times. But going from the environment where we are now, where someone else has our data, whether it's our healthcare data or any other data, a few large companies and healthcare systems have all our data, changing that whole scenario so that the individual, that I as a patient have my data, and then I can do with it and have the tools to leverage that data to connect me to resources that I couldn't do previously, and become paid for the data in some instances. It's a completely different paradigm. So our challenge is going to be is to educate the end users, because this truly puts them in the center in a way that hasn't been done before. We've talked about patient-centered health and patient-centered medical homes, patient-centered this and that for years in healthcare delivery. And this is the first time it truly will put the patient in the center. So that's a key education piece that we have to do a good job on to entrust the individuals to understand that they truly are in the center of this model.
Thanks, Dr. Wood. And with that, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to make a brief closing remark, and then we will wrap. Let's start with you, Frederic.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Thanks for the audience joining us today. I think it's really, an exciting journey we are starting here together with Equideum Health. I think it is an opportunity, but I feel also an obligation for us to make it right. Particular, I think, in the health segment, but in any other segment, because I believe we are party to a big change that will enable, I think, a data economy. And with that, I think very, very clearly, we have to get this right for us and for everybody, I think, that will be a participant in the future.
Thank you, Frederic. Dr. Wood.
Very excited to be with this group and at this time to be able to truly empower individuals to be their best selves, and looking forward to the future.
Thank you, Amit.
Very excited to be part of this journey and the juncture where all of these, let's say, innovative things coming together and forming a kind of end-to-end solution which will transform, as Frederic also said, not only the healthcare sector but also others as well. And really encouraging. I was going through the questions and the feedback from audience, so thank you so much. It's really encouraging to see the feedback we are getting on this thought process.
Thank you, Amit. And Dr. Hoffman.
Yeah, thanks, Heather, and thanks for the participants. Like Amit, I was also keeping an eye on the comments and questions, which are really, really interesting. I just in the closing want to bring that back to where I started, right? For me, it's also a little bit personal, right? I have my parents still who are getting into this age where I start worrying about it. Our oldest daughter, so enthusiastic about public health. Our oldest son, constantly striving for data as a data scientist. So that is a personal motivation. But I think if I can help a little bit in our families out, that's great. But I believe there's so much potential. I believe we can truly make a difference and reshaping an entire industry, and not just an industry, but if we can be part of actually overcoming the problems and issues we have in the healthcare system worldwide these days, I think that would be super, super fantastic.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffman. And from me, in closing, I would like to quote Dr. Melvin Greer, who is a close friend and mentor of mine and is the chief data scientist at Intel. Dr. Greer has said, personal data is not the new oil. It is not fuel. Data is people. And in this, and in my own words, personal data is inseparable from personhood in a radically digital society. And it is time for us to reconceptualize our first principles of what the nature of data actually is and what kind of future we wish to live in with respect to its use. So with that, thank you so much to my esteemed co-panelists. I'm so honored to work with you all. Thank you very, very much. And everyone, thank you for joining us, and have a lovely morning, afternoon, and evening.